My name is Sara Smith-Silverman. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a professor of history at American River College, and today's date is September 13th, 2023. So let's start off by establishing the basics. What's your full name? What are your pronouns? And what's your date of birth?
So my name is Emily Pham. I use any/all pronouns. My date of birth is December 19th, 2001.
Tell me a little about yourself. What are your interests and hobbies? What do you like to do?
So I like art. I like playing video games. I like listening to music. I used to also play music, but it's been a while. I like to read in my free time, listen to music as well. I like doing, for example, I'm getting into collage. I really want to get back into poetry or writing poetry. I also like taking care of plants. I have my little house plants, and I do want to start up a garden sometime again.
So you said you used to play music. What kind of music did you play?
I was actually in bands. So in 6th grade, I joined the 6th grade band at my local middle school because they had a little division for 6th graders, and I played the flute, which was very fun. And then I was going to learn, I started learning a little bit other instruments like trombone, which I still might be able to do a little bit of it because memory, and a little bit of tenor sax, but that one's probably I would not remember how to do. And then more recently, I learned how to I took a piano class. So I can do basic piano, but I'm also not very good because I just took it.
You're very musical.
Yeah.
Okay, so where did you grow up and where do you live now?
So I was born in San Jose, actually, which is pretty far down Bay Area-wise. So I raised for most of my childhood in San Jose, and around the middle of middle school, I moved up to Stockton, California, more Central Valley, and I've been there for a good while for the rest of my middle school up to high school and my community college. And then more recently, just 3 weeks ago-ish, I moved up to here in Sac. So now I'm attending Sac State University here.
What brought your family from San Jose to Stockton?
So my parents actually went down to Stockton first when I was younger because they wanted to open up their restaurant there. So for most of my childhood, I lived with my grandparents instead, and I visited them during spring break and winter break and that kind of thing. And then eventually we all decided that we wanted to be all together. So eventually my grandparents and I, and also a bit of my aunts, moved up to Stockton so that we could all be together.
How old were you? Did you say how old you were at that time?
How old at the time?
When you moved from San Jose to Stockton?
I am not completely sure. It's definitely before, I'd say early teens, whatever the age of middle school is, probably when I moved to Stockton.
Okay, so you said you currently attend college at Sac State. What community college did you attend previously?
So previously I attended San Joaquin Delta College, which is in Stockton. Yeah.
What did you study when you were at San Joaquin?
I changed majors quite a bit, actually. I started as a business major, funnily enough. I think a lot of people start as a business major. Because I wanted to, originally my high school career plan was to open a book-themed cafe, coffee shop, bakery sort of combo. And I was learning business things sounds good as a business. So I did that first. And I got to the accounting class. I was I don't know if I want to do this. So I changed majors. I changed first to anthropology, I'm pretty sure, because cultural anthropology is a little bit of in that realm is sort of an interest of mine. So I was this sounds interesting to learn. I have changed to that. And then I took a sort of career exploration class one of my summers there at Delta. And I was going through the careers, and I was I think it was social work assistant or something in that sort of realm. And I was that sounds interesting. I kind of want to do that. And I was okay, I kind of probably need a social work degree for that. So I changed to social work. And now here we are. I'm at social work.
And how long did you attend San Joaquin Delta College?
I attended for 3 years. The changing of all the majors I need more time to do the other class that I didn't get a chance to do. So, yeah.
Were you full-time or part-time?
Most of the time I was full-time. There were sometimes I was part-time, I think. Just because there were some periods that I think I didn't have a job or my job wasn't too much. So I was like, okay, I can do it full-time. And I know there's definitely some part. I remember at least one semester I was like, dang, this is a lot. I need to reel it back in a little bit. So I did part-time definitely for at least one semester and then made up for it during the summer by taking 1 or 2 classes.
And why did you, or what drew you to social work?
So I guess even with like high school and wanting to open that like sort of like cafe, bookshop, bakery kind of combination, there was always that piece of like wanting to help people. In the entrepreneurship class I took in high school, we were doing our business plans. And I sort of like distinctly remember like one part I talked about how I wanted to set up a system where customers and employees could vote for like a local nonprofit to donate a bit of like the proceeds to each month that would rotate back and forth between employees and customers. You know, people would decide and they would vote on it. So even then there was always been that sense of like wanting to help people alongside, I guess, my passion. And I got drawn to social work just because of the helping people aspect. And then there's always, the social work field is like broad. There's like lots of different people you could help with and lots of things that you could do. So I also felt like I could combine one of my interests alongside helping people. And that's why I'm here now doing social work.
And is there a particular kind of social work that you want to do? Like are certain specific communities that you're thinking about serving?
I'm not completely sure yet. I'm hoping that during my time at Sac State, I will be able to figure that out. And I'm kind of new to Sacramento County in general. I don't know a lot about the communities here. So that's also something I'm hoping to like get into as well. I'm kind of considering some of my interests include like mental health and, you know, LGBTQ plus, I guess, in that realm. So far I'm kind of leaning in like those directions, but I'm still open to stuff, still want to explore different things and just, yeah.
Okay, can you tell me about how you identify with regard to your social identities, broadly speaking? So race, ethnicity, sexuality, gender, disabilities, religion, and so on?
So for, I guess, race, I'm Asian American, but specifically ethnicity-wise, I'm Vietnamese with like a quarter bit of Chinese. Sexuality and I guess romantic orientation, I'm asexual, lack of sexual attraction. And I identify as arospec, which is aromantic spectrum, because I'm still kind of romantic attraction's kind of iffy for me. I kind of have a hard time pinpointing it and feeling it, or if I even do feel it. But I do believe I'm on like that spectrum somewhere. And then I use pan-attracted because, and this was a great thing. One of the Discord servers I was in for, it was like a dating server for ace people. But when we were doing like roles, because people could choose their roles and whatever for their attractions, they use like pan-attracted, bi-attracted, mask-attracted, femme-attracted, so forth and so on, which I really liked because it kind of included, you know, aromantic people as well, or people on that spectrum. So that's what I use. And then I guess it's kind of part of it. I'm also non-monogamous. That's something that I've learned recently, something I've kind of just been exploring a little bit as well. And then I guess gender-wise, I identify as genderqueer, which is under the trans umbrella. What other?
So gender, disabilities, religion. Those are the class.
Oh, okay. Does I don't know if autistic count as disability. Does that fall in that realm?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, it depends, you know, how you view it, but yeah, you can say that.
So I'm autistic, I guess self-diagnosed, because I haven't got really a chance to actually get diagnosed. And I'm also suspecting that I might have ADHD, which I did try to get diagnosed with, but it was a lot of like, my provider was like, here's some phone numbers to call. And I called those numbers. And the number was like, here's some more numbers to call. And, you know, I like got a lot. And then life got busy. And then I forgot, typical neurodivergent fashion. And so I haven't done that yet. So there's that. And then I guess religion, my family is Buddhist. We don't, I guess, go to the temple as often as we used to anymore. Stockton's a little bit lacking in like that department, unfortunately. San Jose was definitely a bit more vibrant in that. I don't really have a say like for what like my religion I follow is. Like I definitely do like with my family. There's some practices that I assume are Buddhist. It's a little hard to part between like what is a Vietnamese practice versus what is like a Buddhist practice sometimes. But I guess do that with them when I'm with them. But most of the time I'm kind of just, I guess, sort of like an atheist / agnostic. Is it the other one?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
somewhere between atheist and agnostic.
Yeah, with some Buddhist practices sometimes.
So what does it mean to you personally? And also, if you don't mind sort of talking about the meaning broadly, what does it mean to be asexual as well as on the aromantic spectrum with regard to your sexual orientation?
It honestly means a lot to me. During COVID, this is when I was exploring all of this and trying to figure things out. It's like, let me think. How do I explain it? It's like the pieces clicking and you're like, oh my goodness, this suddenly really makes a lot of sense. Because before then, I identified as like bi/pan because I feel like everyone started into bi/pan. That's the thing you usually know more about. And like, which kind of works because like, okay, I think a lot of people are attractive regardless of gender or whatever, but I don't experience attraction very often / none of all. Very rare for me to experience attraction. So that's why I was like, well, that's something I never thought about. I guess in high school, you know, a lot of people like dating and stuff. And like, I did date and I was in like a 3-year relationship. So maybe that kind of sort of like, it was hard to explore, I guess, dating in that terms since I was already in a relationship for so long. But yeah, I don't know. I just, like, I did not realize. I was like, okay, I'm just doing my own thing. People are doing their own thing. That's cool. And whatever. And then as COVID happened, I got to like sit down more with this. And it was actually my therapist at the time who, I was talking about like some relationship things. And she was like, have you considered like looking up into like asexuality and what that is? Which, although it was sort of for like the wrong reason, because it was sort of the, you know, asexual means you don't want to have sex, which is not true. It's like a myth. But I did end up looking into it and I was like, oh shoot, like these apply to me. So yeah, and then after like looking into it, reading it, Avian's a very good site for asexual stuff. You know, reading about people's experiences, joining communities, I was like, oh yeah, I really feel like I belong in here. So I'm very, very proud of my asexual identity in that sense. And that's more for like being on the aromantic spectrum. That one came a bit later. Like just like maybe a year or two back. Just sort of in the sense of like, well, there's a sexual attraction and that's kind of easy to like parse because you're like, you know, it's like sexual attraction. Am I allowed to like swear a little bit or do you want a smart PG?
No, you can say whatever you want.
Okay. You know, like, you know, it's usually like, I define as like, you look at someone, you're like, ooh, I want to fuck them, you know? That inherent like sexual attraction does not come to me naturally. But with like being, I guess, on aromantic or on that spectrum, it's like, I assume it's you want to date someone, which I also don't really inherently like have super often. And it's really hard to define what romantic attraction is because everyone's version of like romance and being in a romantic relationship is different. So I've never really been able to pinpoint that down, but I do feel like in that sense, like, that I do feel like, I guess in the sense of like my lack of interest in romantic relationships would put me somewhere on the aromantic spectrum. And something I've kind of been sitting on for a while, I have a suspicion that I might be aromantic. And I'm sure it's some internalized shit, but I sort of like, I don't know, there's a little bit of like that denial, just like, oh man, you know, like I don't experience, I mean, I'm asexual, I experience like sexual attraction. If I'm mostly romantic, I don't experience romantic attraction, like, you know, now what, you know? But that's something I'll work through one day, something else to think about. And then, yeah, I explained a little bit before about the pan-attractive, just sort of like, I follow what some ace and aro people in the community use. We use the split attraction model. Not all of us do, but there are a good portion of us. But it's basically splitting different sorts of attraction. Like platonic, romantic, you got those two. You have your sensual attraction, which is about, you know, physical touch and that sense of that attraction. The one that's like really big for me is like emotional attraction, the connection. It's called, I forgot the name of it, but there's a fair name for it. But that one's big for me, forming emotional connections, like having conversation with people, like this kind of conversation. Having the like deep conversations as well as having the silly ones, connecting with people in the emotional sense. That one's really big for me when it comes to forming relationships, especially beyond friendship too, but also non-friendship and relationships.
What's the word? Is it demi?
No. Like, what do you mean? Like,
well, okay, there's the, I shouldn't probably be saying this on camera, but demisexual, doesn't that mean where you have to be sexually attracted to people, you have to have an emotional connection, right?
Yes.
So you were looking for a word and I was wondering if that was it.
There is like demisexual and demi-romantic, but I wouldn't use those just because I still don't really feel sexual attraction even after the emotional connection. I just use emotional connection in the sense of forming relationships in general. Yeah. Like, for example, right now I'm in a queer platonic relationship with one of my partners. Well, actually, and the other one, sorry. But yeah, for example, I'm in a queer platonic relationship, which is kind of defined as something that's not quite friendship and not quite romantic, something that's kind of in between, that people get to decide, like, what they want in terms of guidelines. You know, for some... Yeah, it's just... Yeah, I'm in a queer platonic relationship, so in terms of forming those kind of relationships, emotional connection / attraction is important to me.
I guess I was wondering, I said demi, and then I was like, well, now I have to say demisexual, which didn't seem quite right?
Demi-romantic.
So I was wondering, or demi-romantic, like if there was a, demi was used as the prefix, like if that was sort of, anyway.
Applied to romantic.
Yeah. Okay, so you also said that you personally identify as genderqueer and that you use any or all gender pronouns. Is that correct?
Yes.
So what does that mean to you personally to be genderqueer? How did you come to adopt that identity?
That one was also very recent, like just a couple of years ago, like after, a little bit like more later / after COVID. I think one day I kind of just sat down and I was like, I mean, because I've never thought about gender growing up, if that makes sense, in terms of myself. Like, I would see it, like, around, and, you know, people apply all the gender norms to everything, of course, but I never really associated with myself and me. I'm like, yeah, people probably associate these things with me and the other genders things with other people. But, like, you know, personally, I never associated with me, like, internally. Well, maybe I shouldn't say internally, because I'm sure there's some internalized stuff, but I just, yeah. So I kind of, like, sat with it one day. I was like, maybe I'm not a woman. So, yeah. So there was that whole thing. And then what really helped during that was trying different pronouns out. I asked, close friends, and I asked my partner at the time to try different pronouns out for me and see how that goes. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I'm pretty good with everything, honestly, all of these. So that's why I use any pronouns. And then I guess in terms of gender, I don't really have a clear cut, I guess, sort of like of what like gender is to me. But I guess a little bit of what I just said before, it's not just woman, it's more than that. And even now, and it's something I've always been thinking about. I don't know if I associate with woman because of just being so used to being a cis female woman. And that's why I was with for so long. Or if it's something that I actually like believe that it is me. So there's that a little bit, which I'm not sure when I'll figure that out. But yeah, I guess for gender, it's just, I don't feel restricted or limited to just woman. I feel like there is more than that. And I feel like gender is much wider and broader for me personally than just woman, which is why I choose genderqueer, because that's a pretty like broad term for, being not cis, which is something I like. And it's very like sort of like fluid feeling, which is also why I don't really use transgender a lot for me personally, because a lot of people associate it with like, like male to female or female to male, but that's not really something, for me. I know it can be used as an umbrella term.
And so how did you come across the term genderqueer? And I asked that in part because I remember in the early 2000s, it was a big word that people were identifying with more, including myself. And so I find these days that it's a little less common for people to identify using the term genderqueer.
Also just a lot of internet searching. I searched up a lot of different gender terms before I decided to settle on genderqueer. I think being, as I mentioned earlier, in the ace dating server helped because there were like roles. We also had like, we were able to choose roles for like our gender or whatever. So I think that was very like a good little starting point there. And I just started looking into more different terms and just like, maybe this doesn't really fit, or like this doesn't really fit. And I kind of just like came across genderqueer. I'm like, I like this one. So that's where I am now.
And so what do you think about the term non-binary, and how does that relate to the term genderqueer?
I think it's also another term under the transgender umbrella, as is genderqueer. I also don't really relate to that one just because I think of it more in the sense of, like, sort of like, it's not a third gender, obviously, but it's sort of like it is outside the binary. It's usually thought of like outside the binary. It's usually thought of, and it's not a third gender, but I feel like a lot of people sort of associate it in that way as well. And there's that still whole aspect of like, maybe, there's a bit of woman in my gender. Maybe there's a bit of, like sort of like masculine men. And I feel like usually, I know that non-binary can mean different things for different people, but I usually see it associated as with like other, not man or not woman, as opposed to like a little bit of everything. So that's also why I don't use it.
So, can you begin to talk about your coming out experience? What the process was like of figuring your identities out? And I know you started to talk about that already a little, but like how people around you responded, how friends, how family maybe responded.
So I'm in this weird like limbo of like not completely out, like out in certain aspects of my life and not out in other aspects of my life. Friends was definitely like they're the first people I came out to, which was funny enough. When I moved up to Stockton for middle school, I became best friends with two of my best friends still today, and we have our own little group or whatever. And funnily enough, we're all queer. We did not know it at the time. At the time, only like one of my friends is gay. He is still gay. So only at the time it was that. And now it turns out we are all in fact gay in some way. So that's very funny. So it's just sort of like the gradual process of like us coming out to each other and like, oh, I identify as, this, or my sexual attraction is that, or so forth and so on. So that's just been really, I guess, smooth. I mean, I guess it probably helps that one of us was already kind of queer as well. So it wasn't like some sort of like big, I'm coming out, celebration. It was just like, yeah, I am this. And of course my friends were like, yeah, cool. And, and we'd come out to each other in different ways and talk about sexuality and gender and stuff. So there's that. A lot of my friends are queer, so maybe it's just not really, it doesn't really feel like the coming out stories you usually see that you see online with people like, oh, I came out to my family, whatever, here with a cake or something like that. It's just a lot of like, oh yeah, I introduced myself, here my pronouns, like cool, I'm queer in some way. They know they're also queer. They accept that part of me as well. So that's really nice. Family's a little bit, I guess, weird. I haven't really come out to my family. I've accidentally come out to like 2 family members because I was trying to, funny story in high school, I had a crush on a girl and I was driving with like my cousin and my aunt somewhere. She was like, oh, are there anyone you're interested in or whatever? And I was trying to switch she for he because obviously I was having trouble making the switch and I accidentally used she once. So like, and at the time I was bi. So like, yeah, I'm bi. And they were like, okay, cool, and whatever. And Matt was like, oh, me too, I'm also bi. So that was also a fun thing to learn. And I think later on, I like kind of.
You said your aunt also said that she was bi?
Mm-hmm.
You were bi?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was like, oh, that's cool.
That's lucky.
I know, like, wow, that's lucky. All right. So yeah, and I think there was a little later something that I think I mentioned to my cousin about being ace, or like, so there's only been that so far. And there's definitely a lot of stuff I haven't come out about. It's more than just bi and ace now. But yeah, besides those accidentals, I haven't really come out to my family. A lot of them are like conservative, and so I'm not really comfortable in the sense of coming out to them. And there was this one moment in high school that I mentioned offhand to like my grandpa that one of my best friends is gay. And it was in Vietnamese, but the best way to like translate it, what he said was like, that's not like right in the head. Like it's mentally wrong, or like sort of like in the sense of like maybe he was equating it more to like a mental illness, which is definitely wrong and was very uncomfortable at the time. We were just kind of sitting in the dentist's like waiting room or whatever. So, so I haven't really, after that, I was like, I'm not really sure if I want to come out to family or ever come out to family. I'm probably never going to come out to family unless something changes about them, unless I see some kind of change or I actively see their support for the LGBTQ plus community. And then I guess in the sense of, my social medias, I have my pronouns in there. I don't have family on certain social media. Of course, my Instagram is mainly for friends, for example. Most of my family's on Facebook, and I don't really use anymore, but I still have just in case. And then I guess going out and about and dressing, not quite cis. That one I've been doing. Up here in Sac is definitely easier, because, well, I do have some family here. Sac is bigger. It's harder to like less likely to run into family up here. While I was in Stockton, it was a little bit, there was definitely like some days I was like uncomfortable with dressing less feminine. And there's definitely been like and there's definitely always been a lot of like, oh, wearing a jacket. If I'm wearing something more masculine, gotta wear a jacket over my. So I guess in terms of like being, I guess, visibly queer and out, because obviously I'm not exactly dressing like the most cis female feminine clothing ever. I feel like I don't dress too masculine very often. It's something I can kind of like play off. Like if I was just wearing this outer button up in this, I was like, it's kind of there. But there's definitely been like, if I were to dress more masculine, I would like wear a jacket over my coat. I kind of like try to get out of the house before without like my grandparents seeing me or something. I don't want those kind of questions. I'm like not out to them both. Yeah, so there's in that sense as well, which is honestly kind of frustrating. I mean, it's something that I have gotten used to doing, but it's frustrating in the sense that I have to like hide what I'm wearing or hide my expression from people that I should be really close to, but I'm not comfortable with expressing myself and being out to them yet. So it's a little frustrating, but it's something I've been doing and done.
So you said you didn't think you were ever going to come out to your family. Are you worried about, and you just mentioned sort of you're creating kind of, it's not necessarily you creating it, but what's happening if you don't come out to them is that they're not necessarily like fully getting to know people in your life who you really care about. Are you worried about that? Like if they don't get to know the people in your life that you care about, they don't know this piece of who you are, your identity, that's just going to kind of create more distance and it's going to kind of harm your relationship ultimately? Are you worried?
Yeah, it's something I've been also kind of thinking about recently and something I've discussed with one of my partners. Because we both discussed like meeting each other's family a little bit. And in the sense that we will both, if that does end up happening, we would both have to play that more like cis male or cis female role. And, I guess for example, my partner talked about like dropping their voice if that were to happen. Or like, I guess, being introduced like, the he and she as opposed to what pronouns we do use. And it, it kind of like, I guess it's very conflicting feelings. It's like, cause like, it feels weird in a way in the sense of like, I feel like I'm like invalidating myself and my partner's like genders or lack of genders. And it's very frustrating to deal with and frustrating to think about. And frustrating that we have to like hide it. So yeah, there's that. I will be honest, I have been having some family troubles in these past couple of weeks. It's been escalating a lot. Not in relation to gender, but just other family things in general. So there is a good chance I will be distancing from myself soon anyways. But I do know that if I were to still, I guess, be connected to them, like that bit of like introducing a partner. Or, I don't even know if you'll introduce partners. Non-monogamous here. I have 2 partners. I don't even able to introduce both of my partners. Especially because one is a transgender woman. So that kind of be like, oh yeah, I'm gay. So yeah, it's just sadness and frustration and sort of that realm of things. But gotta do what you gotta do to stay safe and,
So I know you mentioned, it's funny, it's not funny, but funny in the kind of a sad way funny. Like the way that if somebody in your family says one thing that's sort of against queer people, right, that can really stick with you for years to come. And it's like, I think our family members don't often even consider that when they are saying that kind of stuff. So you mentioned that your family's kind of conservative. Can you elaborate on what you mean by that? And I guess I'm wondering about sort of your family is Vietnamese. Is there anything about your family being Vietnamese that is that influences their conservatism, or that is sort of shaping your willingness to kind of come out to them?
So I feel like this is in general in a lot of Asian cultures, but sort of like that patriarchy of like the man of the house. Like we definitely have that. like, for example, a lot of things, when I was a bit younger, if I wanted to do something or whatever, I'd always be like, it's always go ask your dad because he's the man of the house or whatever. So there's that. And I feel like, sorry, I'm just, how do I word things? They've never really, besides that like incident with my grandpa, they've never really expressed or like talked about LGBTQ plus topics at all. But they've definitely talked about like, being Republican, being conservative, voting for Trump or whatever, the Republican president at the time. And they talked about other things too. For example, when the Black Lives Matter movement was a thing, there was definitely a lot of like discussion on that I don't really agree with. And even like more, and just certain views, I guess, that fall very under like conservative Republican views. And that just makes me wonder if they also follow the same conservative views in terms of LGBTQ, in terms of that community as well. And, it's not something I really want to bring up randomly because I probably feel like it'd be a little weird to be like, hey, what do you think of the LGBTQ plus community? Unless they suspecting something about me. So, yeah, it's a weird, like, I'm kind of in the dark about that. But I do think being, like, because you mentioned, like, asking about, like, Vietnamese, if it has something to do with, like, my queerness. But yeah, in the sense of, like, very traditional Asian household values, patriarchy, sort of household style, kind of whatever the term is, that probably does affect their politics, which in turn affects my queer and trans identities. So there's that. But beyond that, I do kind of view my Vietnamese identity a bit separate from my queer identity. And I guess it also doesn't help that I wish I was more connected to my Vietnamese identity. Like, I wish there's definitely some things I do with family, and obviously I do know Vietnamese. I went to Vietnamese school, and like around middle school, I also went to Vietnamese school at the same time on Sundays. But I wish I was more connected in the sense of like the culture and the food. Like, for example, like I've never been taught to make Vietnamese dishes. Like, I would eat them, of course. My grandma makes them, but I've never been taught. Or like in the sense of like, I know like a little bit about like Vietnamese New Year, but beyond that, I don't know too much, I guess. I wish I knew more about my culture and my like ethnicity. So there's also, I guess, that piece of it as well. I don't know.
Why do you think your family, maybe it's not all of your family, but the family who are Republicans, why do you think they're Republicans? I mean, I guess, does it have anything to do with why they immigrated from Vietnam?
So they immigrated to Vietnam for, obviously as many immigrants do, for a better life. My family was like living in poverty in Vietnam. I've heard like plenty of stories of like, oh, like, we had a farm, we had like 2 ducks, and for example, like we would eat like, like I remember being told like a specific like thing of like, oh, we got a banana and we like found a banana from a tree or whatever, and that was what was dinner for today, like a banana split between the children, I guess my aunts and my aunts and dad, and like a bowl of rice. So it's definitely the various like, the common immigrant story of like moving to another country for like a more prosperous life, for a better life. I think, do
you think it's anti-communism too?
To like the reason from like, I guess, their thought?
Or like being sort of more into the Republican Party?
Possibly. I think it might. I definitely know there's like a lot of sort of like racism in the Asian community, in the Vietnamese community, toward other minorities. I think there's the sense of like, and also the like the what's it called again? The model minority. Like being Asian, you're the model minority. You gotta be all these things and whatever. And I think it's sort of like their way of trying to fit into a like white dominated society as a way to be, be able to be like successful and like be able to live like comfortably in this society is to follow those more conservative, I guess, viewpoints and ideas. And then I think maybe my parents being business owners might have something to do with a little bit about it. I know that Trump was like the policies he enacted for businesses was like, I've heard they were like a lot of business owners, even though they did not agree with like his ideals and statements, because of the policies he presented, they voted for him. That's why. So I'm sure that might be an aspect of it too, or a piece of it. Yeah. You
said your parents own a restaurant?
Yeah. They own a pho restaurant down in Stockton. It's been since 2009, I think. So we've definitely been around for a very long time. Yeah, I don't know what else to say beyond that. But yeah, we've had it for a long time. We've been here for a long time.
Have you found queer friendships, queer community among Vietnamese people, or sort of Asian Americans more broadly as well?
Honestly, not as much. I really wish I did find more. Only more recently, just because I've been caught up in school a lot when I was in Stockton. Finally, like, actually going to queer events and meeting queer people in the Stockton community. So I have met some, like, queer Asian folks, and that's been kind of really nice in the sense of, like, oh my god, you're also Asian, and I'm Asian too. Not in the sense of Vietnamese, but just that sort of, but even then, the general, like, Asian, and just like, oh, we both connect in, like, two different ways. It's really nice. But, like, I guess beyond that recent-ish stuff, I've not met a lot of, like, queer Asian people.
So I was just thinking, if you feel like you want to feel more connected to Vietnamese culture, one way that could really help you do that is if you found people who are also queer, and then it could be sort of like you could find that connection more that way rather than having to find the connection through family.
Yeah.
Exclusively.
I'm also not very connected to the Vietnamese community in Stockton, or I don't know if there's one up here or not. So, I mean, my family is connected to it in the sense of course, they own a Vietnamese restaurant. So they definitely know lots of people and have those connections. But me personally, I'm not very connected to the Vietnamese community down there, which obviously really sucks. And I don't even know how to get into there in the first place. And then also in the sense of, as with any non-LGBTQ community, there's always that, like, I don't know if I can fully be, like, out in that community. Especially there's a lot of conservative Vietnamese people. I will be honest, there's a lot of very old school people in the Vietnamese community. So I'm not even sure if I'd be, like, safe or welcome if I were to, like, be more out in that community. And I'm not even sure if I'd be able to find queer Vietnamese people if they aren't also, like, visibly out. If they have the same thought process that I have, as in, like, being visibly out in the Vietnamese community is hard and could probably, risk some stuff for them and their families and this. So they probably aren't super visibly out. So it's kind of hard to find, especially Vietnamese queer people.
So what does it feel like emotionally to have figured out your identities? Do you feel happy, and do you feel in some ways empowered in your identities?
I really do. I'm super happy with at least where I am so far in, like, my identities, my sexuality, my sexual and romantic orientations, and my, like, gender identity. It's like embracing myself, if that makes sense. Like, embracing myself and being able to express myself and just feeling like, yeah, this is me. Like, yeah, these things are me, and I don't know, it's a bit of a abstract topic. It's a little hard to discuss, but like just to give it a more tangible. For example, like, you know, growing up throughout middle and high school, I didn't get a chance to explore like clothing and fashion to myself a lot. Beyond the like, I didn't really have much of an income. Obviously, I didn't have a car. I couldn't go to places. A lot of my clothes were like chosen, or like I would be with my grandma and we'd go shopping together. But like, you know, now, but it was pretty good timing. Like a bit after COVID is when I started exploring my gender identity, and I got my driver's license and I got a job, so I had the money. So like then I'll be like, all right, let me go to places, let me look at clothes, let me try different things on, see what I like, and like in that sense, I do connect my clothing outer aesthetic expression to my gender identity. But like being able to express myself in that way has like been really empowering and just really, really amazing, you know? So yeah, I guess there's definitely that like good, like a lot of like happy bits, and like being empowered in my own different orientations, and then also meeting people in the queer community. Well, obviously not everyone has the same orientations as I do, but so like being accepted for that, and you know, being like, you know, people being open and loving and accepting, and just like being able to be comfortable around people and expressing myself, being like dressed like this around people, and not having to worry about, you know, oh, they think I'm, you know, what are their opinions on LGBTQ stuff or whatever. Like, just that's really nice and really comforting, and it makes me feel really good. And then this one a little bit less, but definitely sometimes it's also been kind of like sad in the sense of like just like all the legislation and everything that's happening, and like worrying that what that means for myself, but especially worrying what that means for like my partners, my friends who are queer, you know, people in the community, like how that affects them, like worrying like, will they be okay? And you know, there's a lot of that too.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much anti-trans and anti-queer legislation happening nationally, and stuff happening outside of the state impacts people in California, right? Yeah. And there's also stuff happening in the state.
Yeah, for example, sorry to interrupt you. For example, I recently read online, like, there was some Republicans, I forgot what school district it was. I think so, but they were trying to, like, pass some, like, anti-trans legislation, like, stuff for school districts or whatever. And, like, even in California, where we're like, oh, we're progressive, you know, we're democratic and blah, 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 and whatever, very LGBTQ friendly, there is still stuff like that happening here in our own state. And there's still people who are, like, obviously anti-LGBTQ plus here, and those people exist around me, and, you know, so there's that sense of, like, yeah, and as a general sense, we are, like, progressive, but, like, not as an individual sense, not everyone is. And there's definitely, like, still stuff that happens here, you know?
Yeah, and if I mean, obviously, if people are increasingly becoming, right, anti-queer, anti-trans, people pay attention to national media and what politicians are saying at the national level, in addition to paying attention to the local stuff that's anti-queer. And so you would hope that we would becoming more progressive, right, as a culture, instead of going backward. And it seems like right now there's a lot of sort of movement back, like making young people especially feel less safe coming out of the closet and being their full selves. So you mentioned that you're autistic. Can you elaborate? How did you come to that conclusion?
So my younger brother is actually autistic. You know, he's been diagnosed and everything, and that, you know, there's been some small little bits of things throughout my life, and those two thoughts together, so it made me kind of question, am I also autistic? I think what kind of cemented it more for me was being around, alongside, like, you know, getting meeting more people in the queer community in Stockton. there seems to be an overlap between being queer and autistic. So I also met a lot of like autistic folks as well. And like, and I'm like, you know, there's definitely like, I definitely feel like more comfortable around them, and like sort of some of the things that they do, I'd be like, oh, hey, that kind of like applies to me as well, or I kind of feel that about that way too. Like, for example, like stimming and whatever. Like I like doing little like leg kicks, you know, do the little knee jiggling thing, or like certain like sensory things, like oh man, like the texture of like this is very uncomfortable. I'm not gonna wear this shirt today. Or like the texture of my hair on my skin is very uncomfortable today. I'm gonna tie my hair up or something, you know? So I guess seeing also like other like neurodivergent, autistic people as well, meeting those people, sort of like, oh, I might also be autistic as well. So yeah.
And when did you figure this out for yourself?
This has also been very recent. I started thinking about it more like a year or two ago as well. But more recently, more a year or two ago, on and off thinking about it. But more recently, like as I've like met like other like neurodivergent people, I'm like seeing things. I'm like, oh, those kind of are similar to me. And there's also like certain things that like apply to me, and things that I do that are like, huh, I guess that's not quote unquote normal. So it's like, yeah, that's also been very recent. Probably even more recent than the other stuff I've mentioned that was like a year or two ago. But yeah.
And how did it feel to figure this out?
I'm in the weird sort of stage of like, I mean, like I know like the self-diagnosing is valid or whatever, but I have the weird hang up for myself personally, probably just because I like worry about like, oh, maybe I'm like just nitpicking on certain things that I do or say or feel or experience, and I'm just connecting it to this when actually I'm not like autistic or neurodivergent or whatever. But beyond that, I've just kind of been living the same life as I've always been. I'm definitely noticing a lot more things that I do now. I'm noticing a lot more of the things I do now that aren't like quote unquote normal or are more like neurodivergent, autistic seeming, which is very interesting. I'll be like, oh, I make the joke, oh, that's another Italian mark for I'm probably autistic or something. So there's that. But besides those things, it's basically been just kind of, I'm still just kind of going, I guess.
So does it feel empowering to understand, to have a better sort of understanding of yourself?
Yeah, it does. Because in the sense of like, why am I like really freaked out about this thing? For example, why am I freaked out about like my schedule changing? Or like, for example, I got like really like, I'm not a really angry person. But like I sometimes, if it's like someone else I know that's like interfering with my schedule, and like I'm having to have to change it because of them, I can get like really frustrated and angry. And you know, I didn't really know that like equating the having my schedule changed, because that's an autistic thing, right? Like consistent schedule, and it being changed to it being like me being angry. Now I'm like recognizing, okay, I'm in a really bad mood, probably because of this, alongside other things. Now I'm more aware of it. I could be like, okay, now I'm more aware that I get angry at these things. Let me do some things that are a little bit nicer for myself so that I feel a bit better. Or like, for example, like, apparently I get understimulated. This should have been a sign. I love like having noise. Like I like putting on music when I'm home. Or just podcasts or videos, having people talking. I like having sound and stuff. And without it, I feel kind of understimulated. And for example, like I'm like, okay, now I know this. So like, for example, when I'm doing homework, I like putting on music. Sometimes it's like more of the lo-fi stuff, and sometimes it's more of like stuff with like actual lyrics. Depends on the assignment if I actually need to like think and focus, or how much of focus I need. But like just like those little things in the sense of like, okay, I know that I have these things about me, these quirks about me because of my neurodivergency. Let me do some things that make my life easier for me instead of just trying to like power through it, you know?
That makes sense. So are you, under what conditions do you tell people that you're autistic?
I don't really talk about it. I don't really talk about it. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really, if it gets, that's also just kind of in the same with like my queer identity as well. I don't really bring them up unless it gets, one, the topic comes up, and two, I feel comfortable to do so around this person. I'm just kind of like, I'm just existing, you know, as queer and neurodivergent person, I'm just existing in my life, you know. I'm just doing my things and getting through. Unless something like comes up or I actually feel the need to bring it up, then I bring it up, you know.
Do you ever, sort of similar to your queerness, do you ever worry about people's reactions if you tell them? Because of, I guess with autism, it's often just ignorance about what it means to be autistic. But do you worry about people's reactions?
I've not thought super hard on that, to be honest. I guess, like, I mean, you know, obviously with being queer, you always have to, like, coming out as a big, like, part of that, like, culture. It feels a little less so for me with being, like, autistic, neurodivergent, that kind of thing. So, not really. I've not really thought about it, to be honest. I'm sure that if I were to, there'd definitely be some, like, oh, you're autistic? Or whatever, you don't look autistic. Or I'm sure there's some stuff I would face if I were to talk about it. But because I don't particularly feel the need to talk about it unless something happens, like, you know, maybe I'm having like maybe kind of like understimulated or overstimulated or something. I might need to be like, hey, can you like give me a minute or whatever? Or I just need a moment to myself because I need to explain myself. Then it's that, then no, not really, I guess. I haven't really thought about it.
Have you found that you've like, so how has being autistic impacted you in the classroom? Has it impacted you in the classroom?
I definitely noticed that focus can be definitely in terms of doing schoolwork and like focusing, it's kind of hard to get myself to actually do schoolwork. It's hard to all students players rely on the motivation of, yeah, I need to do schoolwork. Doing it ahead of time is the hardest part. I've always been a big procrastinator, and I've done a lot of reading. I've been recently learning. It's probably that like time is the big motivation for me to doing schoolwork and homework. So like when it's like, oh, this is due in like a couple hours, I'm like, all right, I gotta go, I gotta do it. But like anything before then, it's like I don't really feel motivated to do the assignment or do the thing. It's hard to like get myself to do it. And you know, it's definitely, and relying even from middle school / high school and up, relying on the whole like procrastinator mindset kind of thing has not been the best. Like I've still managed to like get good grades and stuff, but there's definitely been like assignments I would miss or assignments I turn in late. And there's always been assignments that like I don't feel proud of because they were like rushed to do. Like I do remember, like for example, this like one class we had to do like a poster for something. I remember and I was just doing it like the night before / in the morning, and I was very unhappy with. I turned it in, of course. I needed a grade, but I was very unhappy at how it turned out. As someone who's also just a big like creative person, I was like, this is not my best work. I did not put the time in what I wanted to in this, and it did not turn out the way that I wanted to. So there's always been like that piece of it. In the classroom specifically, I've generally been fine. I mean, obviously I do my little like fidgets and stuff, which kind of helps me sometimes. And there's definitely been times where like, you know, like losing focus and that sort of thing as well. But that's like that's been like less of a concern, I guess, for me. I suppose the homework and doing schoolwork piece has more been like the biggest concern with me when it comes to like being neurodivergent in schoolwork and how it's affected me.
Do you think there's anything that San Joaquin Delta College and your, you know, as an institution, but also your professors in particular could have done to provide you with more support as somebody who is autistic or neurodivergent?
I know that they have DSPS, which is like for disabilities. I know they provide stuff in that sense, like you can have more time to like do tests and stuff. And I'm sure there's other stuff too. I did not look too into it because I felt like I was kind of fine in the classroom. Not every professor did this, and something I wish they did, but was like, for example, if you're lecturing in the classroom over a PowerPoint, I wish they recorded the lecture, and sometimes they post the PowerPoint, but sometimes I wish they would record the lecture and post it on the classroom as well, so I can go over it. I always find myself that I'm like, I find that and this is general conversation, but I will like miss pieces of words and sentences when people are talking or whatever, and I might have to ask, can you repeat that? Or like, what did you just say? And so that's definitely happened. I can't think of a particular specific instance happening in the classroom, but I'm sure it has. That happens in regular conversation as well. But I really like if, maybe they recorded their lectures and put those up so I can go back to them and listen to them. Obviously, I really like having, when they are recorded, I like having subtitles, which is not always done, but I wish, it was more done, I guess, as well. Like for online lectures specifically, recorded lectures. In terms of that, subtitles are really nice, just so it helps me like follow along and like piece, like, oh yeah, this person's saying this as they're talking. What else? Longer material, I guess, like reading textbook chapter when we have to do reading is kind of hard for me. Sort of like focus wise to do. Like, I'm not a bookworm, I like to read obviously, but like when you're kind of reading something that's like less for fun and more for you have to, it's a little hard to actually push through it and do it. Something I've like found for myself is downloading an extension that like if you have an online textbook that like reads it for you, so I just follow along with that. But I really like in the sense of like, I don't even know what they would be able to do. Maybe they could condense the information somehow. Maybe they could, I don't know what sort of like resource out there are for that, but I would love something for, I guess, in that sort of vein as well.
I think I can't speak specifically to San Joaquin Delta College, but in my experience, I don't think faculty are really trained in sort of and educated about the variety of disabilities and that exist out there and what neurodiversity means broadly and how to serve students who are autistic in particular. And I know autism is a pretty broad spectrum, right? So there's a lot of, I think, lack of training and education.
Yeah. I honestly wouldn't know just because I've only recently learned about this for myself in particular. And like most of my school year at San Joaquin Delta College was like with the idea that I was like, not autistic or not, neurotypical, So I kind of just went through it with like that mindset for a good long time until sort of like around like the end, around like sort of like the last semester or two of like my last year there. So I can't really say if like how, I guess, catering or how the professors if they do incorporate like different things to help those with disabilities or not. Cause I thought it was like if I thought I was neurotypical, but we are.
So how do you think your experience as somebody who's neurodivergent and who's also queer intersect and relate to each other?
I definitely know that there is an intersection between being neurodivergent and being queer. And I know there is like, I think the term is neurogender. I know there was like a term specifically for gender that it involves like neurodivergency and how that relates to your gender. And that's like something that some people identify as. For me personally, I haven't really, I'm sure just like being neurodivergent and thinking of things differently than neurotypical people. I'm sure it's some way impacted how I am queer, just because, obviously being queer is not the quote unquote norm of the society, neither is being neurodivergent. I'm sure my different mindset and how I process things and how I think about things and think about myself has impacted my queer identities in that way. But this is still, being neurodivergent is still very new for me, so I'm not exactly sure how. Not something I've thought too much about, the intersection for me personally, so I'm not really sure. I guess I don't have too much to say on that, on how it impacts my queer identity beyond what I've just said so far.
Okay, anything else you want to say on the topic of disability, mental health, neurodiversity, how it impacts you, especially educationally?
I wish, in general, not just, I'm sure someone can delve to this. There's definitely been some really nice professors and stuff. There's always nice ones and the ones that are less. But I wish, in general, the education system in colleges and community colleges and sort of professors, I'm sure it relates to a broader society as well, but just sort of being more forgiving / accommodating towards those with disabilities and mental illnesses and stuff. I also have mental illnesses, so there's also that fun thing too to deal with. But I don't know. I just wish there was more, I guess, beyond the typical, way of doing things. I wish there was. I'm not sure how to word this. I was on a track and then I lost it. Yeah, I guess I wish it was more accommodating, more open towards neurodivergent, to those with disabilities, to those with mental illnesses. I wish it was. I don't know. I'm not sure what I could say. I'm not sure if I can say so much about this topic. There's a lot to say and a lot to cover. I don't know. Just, I guess, for example, absences, taking attendance, which is already been a thing around since all the way back in elementary school. But for example, kids who maybe they get with chronic illnesses or get sick really often because of those, they would probably have to miss a lot of classes, and they get obviously get a grade on their attendance, and that's really unfair, because it wasn't their personal choice to miss class, just because they had to take care of their needs in their body and in themselves, and that's something they should not have to choose between grades in school versus taking care of themselves. They should not have to sacrifice that, For example, that's a piece of it. That's an example, but there's definitely a lot of other examples out there. But just things like that, I wish things were more accommodating for
people with disabilities, people who are neurodivergent or have mental illness often feel like they have to kind of just push through, and that they're worried that their professors won't understand and be accommodating.
Yeah.
And if there was more understanding, more empathy, then that would help those students do better in the classroom.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you have mental illness. Is that something you want to elaborate on, or do you feel comfortable talking about? You said you have mental illness.
I have social anxiety disorder, which is not fun. I was going to say fun, but no, it's not fun. Was diagnosed with some sort of depressive disorder at some point. But yeah, mental illness, mental health is stuff that I struggle with, as a person with mental illnesses. That's something I do struggle with, especially, and sometimes it's harder than other times. And it definitely affects my schoolwork, obviously, because you gotta, when one thing in your life is going wrong, it affects everything else in your life, and it makes everything really hard to keep up with and do, and I don't think it's not specifically the professors, and for me personally, just in the sense of like, I don't know how they would react if I was like, hey, I missed the assignments this week, so I was having a really bad time mentally this week, or whatever, like messaging them. I'm not sure how they'd react to that. They'd be like, oh, okay, well, let's work collaboratively together, let's collaborate on that and work on that together, and let's see what we can do, like, allow me to make up those assignments or do something else to make up for those points. Or would they be like, well, sorry, we said that you, and the syllabus says that we don't do late assignments or whatever. It's too bad. It's not a family emergency, it's not an emergency or anything, So, whoops, again, I guess you missed the assignment. And so, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how they'll be in terms of how accepting they'll be of like mental illnesses and disabilities and so forth and so on in those sort of vein. And that's why I kind of mean when I said in sort of like openness, I wish it was something expressed or discussed, like maybe in the syllabus, maybe on the first week of class, they talk about it a little bit. Then I'm like, okay, this professor thinks this way, whatever. I feel more comfortable with being like messaging them and being like, hey, I had a really bad time this week mentally. Is there anything I could do to make up these assignments?
So do you, in terms of your mental health, and growing up in an Asian American, specifically Vietnamese family, did you feel like did you feel like you could talk about your mental health issues with your family? How did that work?
Oh, definitely not. We don't, in Vietnamese language, we don't really have a word for mental illness, or not one that I've seen. Obviously I didn't have during high school I went to therapy, so obviously I was underage. They had to know about that, and it was, and they'd be like, how was your like doctor's appointment, the one for like your head, because we don't really have therapist as a term in Vietnamese language, whatever. And like, but beyond, I guess, that mental illness and like mental health and that sort of realm has never really been discussed in like my family, and in Vietnamese culture I don't really see it discussed around in general. I think it's sort of like, beyond not having the language for it, I just think, I don't want to say stigma. I don't think stigma is the right word. It's just very hushed, very quiet. It's being talked about because I don't know. I don't know.
So did it feel hard to you growing up to find the support that you needed because of that?
Yeah, because I definitely didn't get it from family, because I don't know if this is just my family or with the other Vietnamese or Asian families, but there's the sense of like, you gotta keep the peace in the house and you gotta be good and not disturb the peace, and everything's gotta be like, gotta follow all the rules and everything. And like, having a breakdown and crying about something is kind of the opposite of that. And there's definitely been times where I would like, I've had that like, and I'd be like, why are you crying or whatever, stop crying, or like, as opposed to like, less asking in the sense of like, why are you upset, and like, and with like openness and like concern, more like, stop, don't do that, And I'm sure it's also part of it's just growing up and like, being the good girl or whatever. And there's that and that image to keep or whatever. So I kind of learned, at least with family, if I had any trouble with like my mental health, it's something that I would keep to myself, I'd bottle up and not talk about. You asked like, having trouble like finding, services, help with mental health. In the sense of like community college, or in the sense of like in general, just growing up?
I would say in general, yeah. And, if there's something that would be helpful to say about community college in particular. Yeah.
So I guess growing up definitely is hard, but I've also had like friends and my band teacher in high school. She's a really great person. I've had those people that once I learned in fact that balling things up is not very healthy, I started talking to friends and my band teacher more about like my mental health issues and what I would be going through, and that really helped me a lot during that time. In terms of community college, now that I am an adult and I could do things myself, at least at Delta, it's been a lot easier in terms of like mental health. If they're very sort of like, at least the spaces that I occupied, they're very sort of like, mental health is important. You take care of your mental health as well as your physical health, so forth and so on. Delta, I don't want to say recently, but at least a year or two ago, they have a health center there now that they partner with community medical centers, and students can go in there and they don't have to be insured. As long as they're a student, they can like get therapy through there. I did therapy through there probably for the last year or two while I was at Delta. That's what I did therapy through, and that was really helpful as well. I talked about being a student, how that affected and how my mental health affected that with my therapist, and it was just really nice. So in community college wise, specifically Delta, like I think they are doing things and there are there are spaces that are like open and safe to talk about mental health and mental health struggles. And that's something I had a lot easier to in community college.
So can you talk a little bit about your current economic class status and how do you get by while in college, and now have you gotten by while in college?
Currently I'm unemployed, so I'm not sure exactly where that would put that where that would put me in terms of economic class. But my family, I put on a thing. I think I put like middle class or upper middle. I wasn't sure which one just because I don't know too much about like income pertaining to which class and whatnot. Like I assume we weren't poor or like in poverty because we have, roof over our head. We got like our kind of basic needs just met in general, But how does it affect currently in my college or like during community college, or do you want?
How about at San Joaquin College? Yeah, did you work well there? How did you get by? And then in terms of your family's class background, I know you put what you thought their income was, your parents' income. Mm-hmm. I would say that probably put you in the middle class, not upper middle class. It's funny, I say that because a lot of community college students think that their class status is a little higher than it actually is.
Okay. So for community college, I lived with my family, and I did have, I've worked as well. I didn't pay rent and utility stuff, but like for any food, for gas, for tuition, I paid for that. So I had a job. I went through a couple different jobs at the time, and that's how I paid for things. 1 year I qualified for financial aid, which was nice. I was able to like pay for class and tuitions in that way, but it was based off my family's income during 2020, which everyone's income was like very low during that time. That was nice. I relied on the student food pantry a little bit in the sense of like, I guess, not fully on for like my groceries, but just more in the sense of like adding a little bit extra to my meals. Like, for example, I would get like bags of like nuts or granola bars just to add like, I can bring them with me so I can eat on the go. In case I like forget to eat or something, which is neurodivergent very often happens. Or I had to like supplement my meals. Like I make something for lunch and I'll like, okay, let me have like a granola bar on the side, or like I have some nuts on the side just to like keep me more like sated when I'm before like and after I'd have class.
And so wait, where did you work while you were at San Joaquin?
I worked for a bit. I worked at like a donut shop in Stockton, and then later on I worked at the Delta Pride Center at San Joaquin Delta College. Oh, I guess also on that little bit, I was also part of the Pride Scholars program at Delta College, and they had like textbook vouchers. So in that sense, I also had like financial aid or aid and financial whatever, and in like that way as well.
And so what was it like working at that donut shop?
A little weird, as in like my coworker was transphobic weird, so I can't even remember if I was out at, I think at that time I was like, yeah, I'm genderqueer, so it was kind of weird. We had a conversation about like sports and trans people being in sports, because of course during that time that was really big in the news. And I hate to kind of admit it, but I don't follow, I guess, sort of like politics and that kind of thing very well. I don't follow sports very much, so I didn't have a lot of like, I wasn't able to counter what he said very well, which does still a little frustrate me a little bit to this day. It's a little frustrating that I have to like, I mean, he didn't know I was like trans, but like, or queer, but it was a little frustrating that I had to like, even have to be like, oh yeah, I should have my facts and I should have my references and facts straight if I want to counter someone who is, you know, anti-trans, especially about sports, and I'm sure about other things too. But yeah, that was kind of weird. Like we were friendly or whatever, but I could never be like, I could never be like more, or like at least more expressive in my identities, just because I knew he was transphobic. So there's that.
Were you working at the donut shop at the same time you were working at the Pride Center?
No, I worked at the donut shop first, and then I left the donut shop. And then after, I can't remember when I started. I can't remember the timeline. I think it was donut shop, and then I had a job I think it was donut shop, some employment while I was doing full-time school, some employment during summer, and then I think, I can't remember if it was that summer after, the year after, I started working at the Delta Pride Center.
And what did you do for the Delta Pride Center?
So I was a student assistant, so I had a lot of things. First, because we were located we are a physical space that students can come in and eat and do work and hang out, and a safe space. I was, and we were also a part of the General Empowerment Center. I helped with like front desk, greeting students. I helped with students who may come in asking for help, for example, they need help doing their FAFSA or going through the financial aid process, or like they need help picking classes, or they need help navigating something else, or when they're like, oh, I need help with this thing, but I don't know who to talk to, so I came here because I know the people here already, so maybe they can help me, that sort of thing. And then I also work specifically with the Pride Center in like, I did tabling. We table at on-campus events and off-campus events in the community. I did, social media stuff. I made a lot of infographics on like, for example, I made one. I can't remember. I made the one by, for example, like TDOV, Trans Visibility, or like if it's like ACE Week, I definitely made one about back when ACE. Also, just helping with events. We host a lot of like little community events, just so people have like a little place to gather and have fun together. Which I think a lot of queer people, what they look for is a community that is accepting and safe. So we had like a lot of those kind of events as well that I would either host or help plan or run the events.
How did you like working for the Pride Center?
Honestly, I liked it like a lot. Like working in the Pride Center, and as well as working in the General Empowerment Center with the other different programs over there. Everyone was like really nice, and it was just, I don't know, everyone was really open and nice, and I was able just to express my queerness, my transness, myself, just me. Like, it was a safe space, and I was able just to be myself, and it was really nice, and I didn't have to worry about, I don't know if I can say this around this person because, what if they're like homophobic or something, So that was really nice to work there. I liked that a lot.
Do you think that the Pride Center at San Joaquin Delta College had enough resources to do the work that needed to be done?
I want to say, enough resources. I wish there was more, but I think they are kind of limited on how much they can do, which sucks. Like, for example, something I think I brought up or wanted to start was like, something that was in the works. I'm assuming it's still being discussed there now. Something that was in the works, for example, was like a binder program for people. Or I wanted to bring up how I'd want to do, like a clothing kind of like closet for people. But like, I know we were like in the works of trying to get like financial, like a grant for the binder program. I don't know if that's still happening or how that's going. I hope it's going good. But I do wish there was more. But I think for what they have, like when I was there, it was at least good. I don't know. It's a little weird to say or talk about, I guess, when you kind of worked there too. But
did you have enough staff?
I feel like we've had enough staff. For the Pride Center specifically, it was me, another student assistant, and then sort of like the supervisor of the Pride Center / Pride Scholars Program. And then there's also in the sense of, because we were located in the General Empowerment Center, if we needed extra hands with something and a student assistant from another program didn't have much to do, maybe their supervisor sent them over to help us, and we would do that for them. It was very like collaborative community sort of like space. We just shared like resources with each other. And, for example, like maybe like another example, like for example, this program just had their event. They have some like leftover soda. All right. And then we can use the leftover soda for our events coming up, for if we're getting food for that event. Like stuff like that as well. Just, yeah.
Was the coordinator of the Pride Center a full-time coordinator or part-time?
So the, I guess, supervisor, I guess in a sense, coordinator, I think she's part-time actually, which I wish, and she also expressed that as well, but I think she talked about like wishing like she would be hired as full-time or like, but the school isn't really doing that, I guess. So yeah, do
you mind if I ask how much you were paid in your job and how many hours you worked?
I think it was like minimum wage. I was doing like federal work study through them. So I think it was like 15. Is that the minimum wage? Yeah, that's probably how much I was paid for like doing work through them.
And how many hours per week did you work?
It depended. I would change a little bit, like depending on like the semester. That's why I really liked about working on campus and working there. Like just being like, okay, I need, I'm doing more units this semester. Okay, I'm gonna work a bit less, because they were like, your education's important. That comes first, and there's that. Or maybe another semester where I was like doing less units. Like, okay, I could do some more work. I have more time to do more work if I wanted to, and so forth and so on.
Did your family know you were working at the Pride Center?
No. I just mentioned working at Delta and mentioned working at some sort of like front desk help sort of thing, which that's not technically a lie, but obviously I didn't say I worked at the Pride Center for reasons of not wanting to come out to them.
And you said you were living at home at the time?
Yep.
Okay. So you weren't paying rent?
No.
Okay. Did you find it difficult to get by on what you were paid when you worked at the Pride Center, and then I guess before that at Donut Shop?
I think I actually did okay. I'm not sure if it would have been different if I was like paying rent and utilities and other stuff. But I think with like my specific, I guess, scenario, I think I was like getting by like pretty like okay / like well. Did you
get health insurance through the Pride Center?
No, I have Medi-Cal, which I think is through my family, so I did not get it through them. I have Medi-Cal and Health Plan of San Joaquin.
Oh, you have Medi-Cal through your family?
Yes.
Okay. Huh. That makes me wonder more about your class status, but we don't have to get into it, because usually if you're eligible for Medi-Cal, then you're low income.
Yeah, I don't know.
So did you ever, I mean, it sounds like you had your basic needs met. You weren't paying rent. You were doing okay. But did you ever find it difficult to sort of balance? You also said you were a procrastinator earlier. So
Yeah.
Did you ever find it difficult to balance your work hours with, doing well in your classes, getting your assignments in?
A bit in the sense of, for example, like my last semester there, I took a very big workload and that was very hard in that sense. And that probably did affect my like work life in some way, I'm sure of it. I can't remember any specifics right now. But I guess in the sense I mentioned earlier, like I guess the environment there was like, your academics come first, we were also very open on like talking about like mental health. If you need to take a mental health day or something, that is okay. But it has been hard to balance, but it was made a lot easier because of just sort of like the openness and the like just being told that your school, we value your education too. If you have any problems and you feel like you're doing too much, talk to us. There has been times where I've like changed like my work hours or changed my schedule. I'm like, I need more time to do homework, or I need more time for myself or whatever. And they're like, all right, let's change that. So in that sense, then I've felt like mostly pretty good in terms of like managing school and work.
So is there anything you worked on while at the Pride Center that you were particularly proud of? That you really enjoyed, etc., like that you want to share?
Always the infographics I'm very proud of, just because I put a lot of like time and like in terms of like creative. It's like a creative outlet for me as well, just because like I'm doing it through like Canvas, and you know how that. I don't know if you can use Canvas, but
Canva.
Oh, Canva. I'm sorry, I'm mixing Canva and Canvas,
Yeah.
But yeah, Canva. And I don't know, just making it's an intersection of like I get to put my creative energy into something that's like and make it like look nice and pretty and so forth so on. And in conjunction with talking about one of my interests, which are like LGBTQ topics, and being able to explain to people like what is asexual. Here are some common labels under the asexual spectrum. Or like, what is transient visibility? Or what is, what's the other one? What is, sorry. I just lost my thought. But I guess in like that sense, I am proud of my infographics. And I'm also proud of one of the projects we did was make like physical pamphlets of different identities. Like some of them we got online, but ones that we made ourselves. But we found like our buy one we found online. But for example, I made like a trans students in community college, like knowing your rights as like a community college student. I made like that kind of pamphlet. So that was really fun to do, both in the creative and the like interest of mine, and sort of like combining again. Or like I didn't make the ace one. We found the ace one. I made an arrow one, an aromantic one. But I guess the infographics and the pamphlets, those are something I've always been like proud of making or I've been doing.
So I wanted to ask you some questions about your college classrooms. Oh, actually, backing up a second. So you're not at San Joaquin Delta anymore. You're now at Sac State, and I know you're at the beginning of your time there, and you said that you're currently unemployed, but you're not living at home anymore. So how are you getting by now?
So far it's been a lot of reliance on the food pantry there for groceries, a lot more than I was at Delta. Because before I was using it mainly just to like supplement my meals. Now I'm kind of relying on that for meals, plus any food that I already have. And then right now I'm just kind of relying on whatever financial aid I still have from Delta. I didn't use all of my financial aid that I got. I'm using that to pay for like classes and textbooks. And then I'm kind of dipping into my savings a little bit for like other things. I'm trying really hard not to, do that as much just because, I want to have my savings.
Do you get financial aid?
I don't qualify for financial. I normally don't. That 1 year that I did was just because the income was based off 2020 from COVID, so it was definitely extra low. But normally I do not qualify for financial aid. So yeah.
How are you paying for your housing?
So it's a little weird. My family bought a house in Sacramento after some family drama stuff had happened. And I'm allowed to live there, not paying rent, but I do pay for utilities, like, trash and water and electricity and stuff. So there's that.
So that adds up.
Yeah, that's also kind of coming out of my savings for now until I get a job.
Do you imagine that you'll continue living there while you're at Sac State?
I do want to move out eventually because I really want like my own independence. And I feel like, partly for just some family issues, and probably also, I guess one thing to think about is just like my queer and trans identity. While I'm living with, just me and like one other family member who I accidentally outed myself to, so he's very chill about things. Just in the sense of I still can't be completely myself, or how I want to express myself while living there. So I do eventually want to move out. And yeah.
So are you feeling kind of stressed about your finances right now since you're looking for a job?
Yeah, a bit. No, a little bit would be understatement, but yeah, just a bit.
So making that transition to Sac State a little hard?
Yeah, a lot of things are making the transition hard beyond the normal hardness of the transition. I really do not like dipping into my savings, I will be honest, but it's kind of what I've been doing just because I have a decent amount of savings. It's just, I'd rather have an income. I'd rather be stable and working and have the job and have the money and, and that sort of thing.
Okay, so if it's okay, I wanted to talk about your classes. So in high school, did you ever take a class that was inclusive of queer and trans people's lives and experiences?
No, or at least not that I could remember of. I feel like I would remember if I did take in high school. A lot of like exploring queer and trans identities was like online and looking things up and through friends and stuff. I don't think I took any class in high school that were inclusive in that sense at all, really. It wasn't really discussed.
And did you take any classes that were inclusive of Asian American people's experiences?
In high school? No, not really either. Because, high school is sort of your basic, like your math and your science and your U.S. history. You don't really, U.S. history is mainly like, how the U.S. was found and so forth and so on, the birth of the country. Yeah, it wasn't really talked about. Not much in terms of like Asian identities. So
you just mentioned that queerness and Asian American people's experiences were not discussed in your high school classes.
Nope.
Do you think it would have felt meaningful to you in some way or important for queerness and to be discussed in high school?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think especially if it was for queerness, I feel like I would have learned more about myself sooner if that was a resource presented to me. Rather than like, I just kind of, obviously being on the internet and you learn about things or whatever. But like, I just felt like if it was like part of the curriculum, part of classes, I've been like, what is transgender? Let me look that up and read about this or whatever, as opposed to later learning about it. And I'm like, okay, what's this? Or like, I guess Asian American. I guess being like Asian American, I think that one less in the sense of like finding more about myself and more in the sense of like, oh my goodness, that's me. I relate to that. That's like, my people kind of. We're Asian American is a big group, you know, but like just I think there would have been some sense of like, you know, like awe and like kind of like ooh proudness of it if that was like in the curriculum as well.
I think the kind of experience of invisibility in the curriculum is sort of common for, you know, around queerness, and that's also common around the Asian American experience in the U.S. And then when you sort of like combine, right, you're like both Asian American and queer, and your identities are not being reflected in the curriculum. It's kind of similar. There's a parallel there.
Yeah.
Well, how about in college?
College, like definitely more so, but it's like you usually have to go looking for them as opposed to being like, oh, I'm gonna take my biological anthropology class, and yep, it'll talk about something there. You know, well, almost probably a little bit harder to incorporate something, but yeah, usually it's more of like a you have to look for it. Like for example, like. Instead of taking the normal U.S. instead of taking like a normal like history class, I took an Asian American Pacific Islander history class over the summer while I was there. So like I specifically sought out that experience, and I was like, oh, like I've learned about the history of like different Asian American groups in the U.S. and you know how they got here, how they were affected, things they've gone through, and that was really cool too. And then. I guess in terms of, I guess, queer and trans, that one is, I feel like I didn't like specifically sought out that class I'm sure there is a class there. I didn't specifically sought out it, but I did get it a little bit in some of like my classes, like as maybe like part of a unit or part of like an activity that was part of the unit or maybe was mentioned in the textbook. Like beyond that, I didn't really have, you know, much. I've seen much.
So would you say that, it sounds like what you're saying is that queer topics were not really covered in depth, but they were touched on here and there.
Yeah, it depends on the class. I can think of like one that was a little bit more in depth, but mainly just like touched upon.
And so for that Asian American and Pacific Islander history class, why was that important for you to take? What did you get out of that class?
Besides just like learning the history of different Asian American groups and a little bit about, well, we didn't go too much into like Vietnamese people specifically, but just a little bit I learned was very like, oh my goodness, like this is part of my culture, this is part of my identity. And I did talk about a little bit before, but like I feel a bit disconnected from my culture. I feel like I don't know a lot about it. But like taking that class, for example, kind of made me feel a little bit like, oh, like, you know, this is my culture. This is like part of me. This is like a part of my history. It's like, it was like just something really nice to like see and learn and hear about.
Was queerness talked about in that class at all?
The Asian American, No.
Do you think you would have liked it to be talked about? Like Asian American queer people's experiences, at least briefly?
I think that'd been really nice. I'm not sure how the professor would have like fit it into the class, but if it were like briefly discussed or like touched on, I think that'd been like really nice. Just a little nod to like, oh, this professor is, you know, kind of thinking about, at least queer people or like trying to include them in some way a little bit. Like that's really nice. They probably are like, you know, an ally or something, and that would have been also a little nice. I guess nice to see as well.
So how important do you think it is to include queer and trans topics in the course curriculum for you to feel included and seen in college, at your previous college and your current college?
I think it is important to include like queer and trans curriculum as well as or topics in curriculum, as well as other topics in general with different minority groups. I mean, even like when it's like, I get all excited when it's like briefly mentioned, even when it's like brief, which is like the bare minimum, I know, but like, even when it's like briefly mentioned, like, for example, one of my textbooks, it mentions like asexual people, and I got really excited. Like, even in media, I don't see too much about asexual people. So whenever I see that, I get like super excited. I'm like, oh my god, my book mentioned asexual people, or the TV show I'm watching, it mentioned them or something. And I get excited. I'm like, oh my God, it's like, me, it's us, it's my community. It's like people see us, and it's like, I don't know, this makes me really happy. And like, maybe this will be like, people will look into it more, and they will like, what is asexual? And they'll look into it, and maybe there'll be some people who even identify with it, and they're like, oh, this is me, and they will learn that they are ace, and they're like, I don't know, it's just, even just like a little mention is always like, someone just like, oh, they're thinking about me, they're thinking about us, they're thinking about my community. We are included, we are being considered, and that is nice. Even if it's like, should be the bare minimum.
So what have faculty done in the classroom to make queer and trans students feel welcome and included?
So I've seen like some faculty / staff who use like in Canvas, that's the right term this time, Canvas, like in their, like put your pronouns in there. I've definitely seen people who've done that, or put them in their emails, which I was always kind of like, oh, okay, cool. You're at the very least an ally, so that's really good to see. And I feel more comfortable like being like, okay, putting my pronouns in my emails to them, because I don't want to say I get a little weird, but I get a little nervous sometimes about putting my pronouns in like my emails or something. Or like, I'm like, oh, I don't know how this person would feel about me. Would this professor or faculty treat me any differently or think of me differently because of my identity or whatever. So, but when I see them doing that themselves, I'm like, oh, cool, that's really nice. At least they are an ally. So maybe they won't treat me in any weird way or anything. One of my professors, right now I'm taking a class at Sac State. He, besides like, doing, his pronouns also in his syllabus, which is very nice. I've also had 1 or 2 professors who've done that as well. He also, we do name tags for the class, and he had everyone like make name tags with their name, their pronouns, and cute little decorations if you want to. And I thought that was just like really nice. And I was like, oh my goodness, hey. I mean, like, he's definitely an ally. And so I definitely feel like more like comfortable in that class because of it as well.
What class is that, if you don't mind my asking?
Def 51, actually, American Sign Language. Yeah.
Is that your first sign language class?
Yep.
So have faculty done anything else that you can remember that has that's made you as somebody who's queer, or made other queer trans students feel like welcome, like they belong in the classroom?
Not really. I don't know what else I'd look out for if they were to do things. I guess, I did have, one of the English classes I take, I did have a professor who like actively would try to include different, like when we do like, for example, we talked about, what's one of them? Psychoanalysis theory or whatever, and here's some readings we have to read and analyze about. She made sure to diversify what kind of pieces we were reading. Like we had like one unit was like reading a bunch of different poems, and we had someone who was like, or different short stories. I remember one of them was like from someone who was, I think they were Chinese American, but they were Asian American. I was like, oh, this is really nice. And I was like, oh yeah, I relate to this story as like an Asian American experience. It was about, sort of like quote unquote, like broken languages with older Asian American immigrants, like knowing bits of English, and it makes it harder to communicate, and people treat them differently. They treat them like, as if they're stupid or dumb just because they can't communicate as well in English, and how that like affected, because the author was talking about like her mother and how that affected like their life or whatever. Like things like that was like really nice as well, just to like see. For example, that's another one.
So do you tend to share your pronouns in the classroom? I mean, I guess when asked, like in that example you gave of your professor for your deaf studies class or your ASL class.
Yeah.
You share your pronouns.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you share your pronouns otherwise, like when you're interacting with students or faculty if they don't ask?
I'll be honest, not really, which I do kind of feel bad about sometimes because obviously working at the Pride Center is like, one of the ways you can make more inclusive spaces for queer and trans people is to share your pronouns in conversations. But I don't know, I just always worry whether like how it'd be taken. Like if someone else were to share their pronouns first, I'd be like, all right, cool, here are mine, But like if it's me doing it first, I'm immediately just putting myself out there. And I don't know what would happen after that. I worry that, as I've mentioned before, I worry I'd be like treated differently or treated weirdly just because of my like trans identity.
So then do you feel like you have the experience of being misgendered in the classroom?
Yeah. I mean, like, I don't use any pronouns, so she doesn't exactly like. I'm usually fine with she. I don't find that my gender comes up too much in the classroom because it's usually just more of like we're doing the topic and we're just having a discussion. Pronouns probably would come up more just if someone was like referring to me, but I'm like I guess not less and not so much misgendered. I guess if that makes sense. I don't know. Like,
yeah, because you use any and all pronouns.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess maybe a question I should have asked earlier is, do you sometimes feel like you have a preference, like you would like people to use masculine pronouns, or you would like people to use they, them, or, do you have a preference?
Sometimes there's even like some days where I'm like, don't use she for me, or may use only they for me this day. Those have been a little bit, I guess, far few experiences so far. So I haven't had too much problem in the classroom in terms of that. And usually if I have those kind of, it'd usually be like, oh, hey, my friends I'm hanging out with later, can you use these for me today? And they'd be like, cool, for example.
So have you ever felt like explicitly excluded or discriminated against because of your queerness or being Asian American or your other identities in the classroom?
Not explicit in the sense of like it's directly being at me. Like they're like, oh, you're insert F slur here or whatever, But there's definitely been, I'll give an example. One of the classes I took, the professor, he likes to show, I guess, quote unquote, like funny videos. And he's complained about how he can't show certain ones anymore because like, oh, he'll get in trouble for it, or students have reported about it in the past. But he showed one that was like, how do I describe it? It was like a chart being like the ideal woman or whatever. And it was like, if here's like a line here, here's your line here, in this realm, this is where all like the crazy women are, if she's right here, or right here is like the sweet spot. And then there's like the bottom, it's like this. And the bottom, it was like, if they're like down here, they're not, they're trans. They're a man. They're not a woman, they're a man. And that was very uncomfortable to sit and watch that video in class. I was like, okay, this is happening. And I will say it was not related to the craft curriculum. It was just like a funny aha video he wanted to show. He does show funny aha videos. But yeah, that was very uncomfortable. And I was like, well, yeah, definitely. I already figured that he probably wouldn't be open to me sharing my pronouns anyways, with how he was complaining about like people being snowflakes about in the beginning of the like first day or week or so. He was talking about how he was complaining about how I couldn't show certain videos because of people being like snowflakes or whatever. So I figured that I was very not safe to express my pronouns and gender identity and so forth, so on there. I mean, that kind of solidified it, of course, but ugh, yeah, that was not a fun experience.
No, that sounds awful.
Yeah.
But like, do you know if he's had any complaints against him for doing things like that? Like, is he discrimination complaints, that sort of thing?
I think so, because he did complain how he wasn't able to show certain videos anymore just because of, I guess, the material they had. So I assume he's had complaints before, but I mean, he still showed that video, I guess. So I don't know how seriously he's taking those complaints.
So how did that make you feel as a student in that classroom in general? Did it affect your investment in the class, your relationship with him? Did you go to his office hours, or did you feel like you wanted to keep your distance?
Like, I kind of tried to keep my usual, like, I have my usual, like, I'm being, like, nice and whatever, and to the general, like, public and general public. I try to keep, I try not to show, like, outwardly. I'm like, I'm kind of uncomfortable, whatever, whatever. But I definitely wouldn't, like, if there was certain things that would come up in relation to, like, maybe, like, my trans and queer identities, or maybe if I want to talk to them more regarding, like, my mental health, or something along those lines where, like, conservative people would have certain feelings on it, I probably would not have come to him. I probably would not bring it up to him. I would be honest. I wouldn't feel comfortable to do so.
So, have you ever struggled academically? Have you, like, not done as well as you want to in classes, or failed classes even, or had to drop classes, that sort of thing?
Specifically just because of, like, discrimination or whatever.
Just any reason, actually. Like, so I guess if you haven't done well in classes, or you haven't been as successful as you want to be in the class, why do you think that is? What caused that?
Honestly, probably the procrastinator tendencies are, like, the biggest one. And yeah, that one, and just, like, I've mentioned before, like, getting myself to actually do work and so forth and so on is hard, and motivation is hard. And I've gone through so many different things. I've tried so many different things, like to-do lists and calendars, and, like, not quite bullet journaling, but something around that vein. And I go back and forth between things still. And I've never found one solid thing that's, like, worked for me or kept me, like, yeah, I'm on task and I've got my stuff done and put together and whatever. I guess in terms of, like, queer and trans identities affecting my, like, experiences in the classroom, and sort of, like, I guess in a sense, not really, because usually I kind of just, like, push through it. I'm like, okay, well, this is the class. I'm taking it. I gotta take it. I gotta finish the class. This is a shitty experience. Yeah, and I probably can't, like, talk to about certain things with this professor now or whatever. But, like, it's a class. I gotta do it. I need the grade. I need, either that or drop out of the class or whatever, and, waste that money and time and so forth and so on. I'd rather not do that. So, yeah.
Anything else you can think of to say about your experience with the curriculum, your sort of sense of belonging in the classroom, that sort of thing?
Curriculum and sense of belonging. I'm not sure if this is a, like, queer/trans thing, or if it's just because of how community colleges and schools have been in general since after COVID. But I wish there was more of a sense of, I miss sort of, like, in high school and middle school when you, like, knew people in your class and you talked to them and whatever. I feel like that's a lot less prevalent in community college and higher education in general. I'm not sure if that's normal or if that's because of just how COVID affected things, but I wish there was more of the sense of, like, again, knowing people and making friends in that way for that sort of thing. Yeah, I think that's what I kind of got. I don't have too much to say.
While you were at San Joaquin Delta College, were you mainly online?
One year was definitely online because I graduated 2020. So I went straight to community college afterwards. So 2020 was definitely online. Things started opening up a bit more, but it was still mainly like online/hybrid. I think it was only within like this last year or so that they're like more like there's also more in-person classes are going to come back in a bit more. So I'm sure that's affected how like I have had professors who they try to make it like a classroom. They try to have like discussion posts and boards and space where people can talk, but it's kind of hard through the online medium. Even if I appreciate their efforts, but doesn't completely work the same or work out.
Can you think of examples, just in general, not related to your identity as queer or your identity as Asian American, that anything a professor has done that has really helped to motivate you to do well in a class? Just in general?
Obviously all professors can't completely control this, but like if there are topics that are interesting to me personally, that really helps them. Like, ooh, I want to learn more about it. I want to read about it. I want to do things. I want to talk about it. I want to discuss about it. That's been really helpful in terms of motivating me. I know you can't do that for every class. Sorry, it's really hard to make hard to make calculus super interesting if you're not interested in calculus, for example, But for example, I took intro to psychology, and there was can't remember if it was a unit or a section, but there was definitely at least a mention about queer identities and trans identities and so forth. Just a little bits of mention. But when we got to that sort of unit or that section, I think it was about learning about yourself. I think it was it wasn't intro to psychology. I think it was personal and social psychology was the class, I think. So we were a lot about learning about different things in psychology and concepts and being able to apply it to ourselves. So we got to that sort of unit-ish. And that was mentioned, and I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And I'm just seeing it being mentioned is nice. And obviously it gets me excited and everything.
So what do you think that San Joaquin Delta College could do to make trans and queer students feel more included in general on campus?
I do know they do name change, which is already a nice, good step already. And we do have gender neutral bathrooms. I wish there were more, and I wish the certain bathrooms were in certain places. For example, we have a little area that goes an area that goes down a bit in a building there. It's called the Forums. It's dark there. And a student mentioned that's a very good way to get jumped or something if you were trying to go to the bathroom. Yeah, that is a very easy way for that to happen. So there's that. I know that during the summer as I was finishing up things there, a friend of mine who was also, I think, part of the Pride Club there. I was trying to get the Pride Club started. They were going to talk to some higher ups there about and propose more gender neutral bathrooms on campus. I haven't been following that. I don't know what's happened with that. I hope that the answer is yes. Let's put more gender neutral bathrooms in buildings. So there's that.
Can I just ask, why is it important to have gender neutral bathrooms?
Well, just because obviously there's, it's not always the safest for certain trans people. Maybe if they're assigned male at birth and transition to they're a trans woman, they might not feel super comfortable in using a woman's restroom because you never know. People are scary and the thing about it all and all the topics about it. But having a gender neutral bathroom, it would probably feel safer. It's probably safer for them physically, and also at least more affirming and less dysphoric than just going into a bathroom that's they're assigned gender at birth. And then obviously there's non-binary people as well. So I think a gender neutral bathroom would is also good for them as well. And just in the sense of if you actively have gender neutral bathrooms beyond just the family ones, not the family ones, just an actual gender neutral bathroom that's labeled as gender neutral, it's sort of like that signal of, okay, this place is a place that does care about me, about my needs, that they will like accept me in some capacity. It is at least a safe place. So there's that like sort of signal too.
Yeah, if you can't even provide a bathroom, how are trans and queer students supposed to believe what you say about wanting your campus to be inclusive?
Yeah.
It's a pretty basic function, going to the bathroom.
Yeah. And even I didn't make the postage time for this, but like, it's not even just for like trans students. Like, for example, like someone with a disability who has like an assistant of a different gender, they can use that. Maybe a parent going in with their child of a different gender, they're going in together because parents helping their child. Like, it's not even just for trans students, you know, there's like other groups of people that it would help too. And it's also signaling to them that they are included and respected and so forth and so on in that way too. And this is a space for them too.
That's a great point. So when you were at San Joaquin Delta College, where did you find the most community?
At the Pride Center. Funnily enough, right? I know. The queer and trans student found community at the Pride Center. But yeah, at the Pride Center, I met like a lot of like most of my coworkers. We like were kind of like, especially like my coworkers specifically at the Pride Center, we were friends. And then I also was like friends with like outside of work, some of those folks who worked in like the empowerment centers and the programs there as well. And the other like queer and trans students there at like events where they just come in and sit and I would get to talk with them. And, you know, we became friends that way. And that's where I kind of found like my like friends at like in college during that time. Just because, yeah, I mean, obviously them being either queer or trans, or at least an ally if they're in the space, you know, because we welcome allies as well. Or like if they like worked in the empowerment center or the Pride Center, we definitely know that they gotta be, you know, at least like open to LGBTQ plus people, because they work literally right next door to the Pride Center. It's literally like right a door away. It's literally a door away. So there's that. So just, yeah, that's where I found like my group of people that I knew would be like would accept me for all of me, for my identities, for everything. It's where I felt comfortable in, and you know, yeah.
Okay, so there are definitely more questions I can ask, but to not keep you here forever, I'm going to try and wrap up. Do you want to return to any questions? Is there anything you want to add?
I guess this one's more about like finding community and finding it in Sacramento, because I'm new to Sacramento. I'm new to Sacramento County. I'm having a harder time, and I'm not sure if it's just because of like I just moved here. I have so much going on right now. I haven't been able to explore the community yet. Sacramento's a lot bigger. I feel like Stockton was a little bit more tight knit, and because we were smaller, I've definitely seen like lots of like queer events on Instagram, but haven't had a chance to go to. And obviously, I know like Sac State has their Pride Center, and I've talked with some people in there, and they've been like really nice and opening so far. But I just really hope that like I'm able to find my community up here as well, you know.
Well, as a bookworm and somebody who's queer, I would suggest checking out the Lavender Library if you haven't already.
Yeah, I've heard that much. I haven't had a chance to go yet, but I follow them. I plan to sometime.
I think they do art things too, where you gather and do art together.
That sounds nice.
All right, well, thank you.